Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to introduce the SGS webinar for Article 117 of the MDR. My name is Gregory Jacobson. I'm the Sales Director for the SGS North America Medical Division. The speaker today is Ibim Tariah. Ibim is our US-based Business Development Director. A little bit about SGS. SGS is the world's leading inspection, verification, testing, and certification company. We have over 98,000 employees in over 2,600 locations around the world and expertise across 7 global industry sectors. We provide assistance and expertise with global support and services that cater to all industries. We are the largest provider of audit, certification, training, and advisory services. We have the ability to turn your needs into comprehensive solutions, and with a consistent service delivery via our worldwide network and global footprint. We have highly experienced quality and regulatory experts in the medical device certification area, ready to offer training to you from our SGS Academy. At the end of the presentation, we'll have several links to you for the SGS Academy. An email will be sent later with this link to a recording and a copy of the presentation. There will also be Q&A at the end, so please put all your questions into the chat box so we can discuss them at the end of the presentation. There will be a survey on your screen. Please fill it out at the end. Thank you for joining us today, and we will start with Ibim.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, all. As Greg said, my name is Ibim Tariah, and I will be taking you through this webinar today. Our agenda is as follows. We're going to look at the definition of medical devices under the MDD and the MDR. We're going to look at the background of device-drug combination products under the MDD, and then look at the new requirements under the MDR in Article 117. Then we'll consider the device-drug combination products EU regulatory pathways, and then spend some time on the general safety and performance requirements of the MDR. This is the guts of the regulations. Then we'll look at the notified body rule in certifying drug device combination products under the MDR, and spend some time on transition provisions under the MDR, and wrap up with a Q&A session on the implementation of the MDR timeline extension regulation. So I'll put the two definitions under the MDD and MDR side by side. And you can see that they are almost identical, except for the last few sentences. And I've highlighted the difference in green, where it talks about the device has to act on or in the human body. That is so important because it then begins to include devices for the control and things like conception, also devices intended for cleaning, disinfection, and sterilization of devices. So under the MDD, you may recall the guts of the MDD are the essential requirements in Annex 1 that apply to device components for safety. And just reference Article 1 of the MDD. However, what we found was that the contents of the MDD didn't quite explicitly relate to the text content of Directive 2001/83/EC, which is the Medicinal Directive. There were no details on what was expected on how an assessment to Annex 1 of the MDD was to be conducted for this type of devices. There was no mandatory involvement of the notified body. And frankly, there was inconsistent competent authority scrutiny of such devices. Clearly, there was a gap in the European regulatory system which was why it was decided to be addressed under the MDR. And the section that deals with it is Article 117 of the MDR, which, as you could see, kind of has been derived from an amendment to the Medicinal Directive. What I've done here is highlight key phrases of the requirements. For instance, it talks to assessment of the conformity of the device part relevant to the general safety and performance requirements set out in Annex 1 of MDR. It says the manufacturer's EU declaration of conformity or the relevant certificate issued by a notified body. In the second paragraph, it talks to the fact that the authority shall require the applicant to provide an opinion on the conformity of the device part. And as you can see, this opinion is issued by the notified body, not the competent authority, but by the notified body for the device component of this medicinal product. I thought I would share some examples of the types of devices covered within the scope of Article 117. So we're talking about pre-filled syringes, pre-filled injector pens, novel pre-filled devices, transdermal contraceptive patch, metered dose inhaler, oxygen bottles for medicinal use. So these are the type of products that are specifically covered under Article 117. If there was one slide everybody should pay attention to today, is this one. Because this kind of summarizes EU regulatory approval pathways for medicines or indeed products that are drug device combinations. So I'll go through this slide slowly. Going from left to right, everything in black, by the way, has to do with medicinal products, and everything in white has to do with device products. But we are particularly interested in the bit in the middle, which is in gray, i.e. the drug device combination products. So again, moving from left to right, black is medicinal products, notified bodies don't get involved. But if you go into the first gray box that has MDR Article 1, Paragraph 8, that relates to devices incorporating medicinal substances. So in subparagraph 1, it talks about the drug has an ancillary mode of action. If it does have an ancillary mode of action, such as a drug-eluting stent, it's a Class 3 device. It's a medical device because its primary mode of action is physical. The drug has an ancillary effect. In those situations, notified bodies are obligated to seek scientific opinion from the medicinal competent authority. Now, if you go into subparagraph 2, the drug has a primary mode of action. That is not a device. That is a medicine in Europe. And per the requirements of Article 117, the manufacturer, or indeed the medicinal competent authority, will seek an opinion from a notified body for the device component. Moving on, if you go into Article 1, Paragraph 9, that refers to devices administering medicines. Again, if you look at the white box, in subparagraph 1, you have a situation whereby it's a device, notified bodies go ahead and approve it. But in subparagraph 2, if it's a medicinal product, again, per the requirements of Article 117, that's a notified body involvement. And then the final box to the extreme right has to do with medical devices. And of course, the medical devices will do the conformity assessments and then issue a CE certificate if everything is satisfactory. So this slide, I think, truly provides, in a snapshot, regulatory approvals that will be applicable to anybody that has a drug device combination under the EU regulatory framework. So what is the impact of Article 117 on medicinal products manufacturers? The requirement is for the relevant GSPRs of MDR Annex 1 that apply to the device component to be reviewed. Okay, there's a need to find and work with an MDR designated notified body, such as SGS. That manufacturer needs to obtain a notified body assessment report, include the notified body opinion report in the MAR, Market Authorization Application. This is for the medicinal product manufacturers. But keep in mind, if you already have a device component in your drug device product, the MDR timeline extension deadline is 26th May 2024. We're only roughly 5 weeks away. So if you're not aware of it, make sure that device component can continue to be used after this deadline. Otherwise, you have to stop placing that device on the market, even though it is part of a medicinal product. In case of changes to device, the notified body reassessment required for significant change to the device. So if you have, I don't know, an inhaler and you change the way it actuates, that device aspect of the combination device has to be looked into by a notified body. I've been referring to the general safety and performance requirements of MDR as Annex 1. This is the guts. It shows how a manufacturer can demonstrate compliance to the MDR. And believe it or not, there are over 180 requirements. It's spread over 14 pages and covers 3 key areas: the general requirements, design and manufacturing, and information supplied with the device. I'll just spend time talking about each one of these 3 key areas. The GSPRs are summarized as follows. You can see number 1 talks to safety and performance as intended by the manufacturer and incorporates the concept of acknowledged state of the art. In other words, you're going to be working to the current standard, to the current guidance documents, etc. It covers risk reduction as far as possible, risk management, risk control, risk of use error, including economics, lifetime of the device defined, packaging, transportation, and storage, undesirable side effects are minimized such that benefits outweigh the risks. So implied is the fact that there will always be some risk. But at the end of the day, it's a judgment call whereby the benefits must outweigh the risks. Then you have Annex 9, GSPR 9, Annex 16, which covers devices with no medical use. Of course, it goes on and on until we get to GSPR 23, information supplied by the manufacturer. So every medical device will be subjected to demonstrating compliance to all applicable GSPR requirements. Then taking them in bits now, the general requirements in Chapter 1 cover GSPRs 1 to 9. But I can assure you that GSPR 9 is not applicable to this type of device. GSPR 9 is for those products without a medical use. So for every medical device sold in Europe, you must demonstrate compliance with GSPRs 1 to 8. GSPR Chapter 2 covers GSPRs 10 to 22, which is design and manufacture. And believe it or not, Chapter 3 is not applicable, hence it's in gray. And I will explain that in a moment. So Chapter 1 talks to, very similar to the Essential Requirement 1 in the MDD, but there's an additional emphasis on risk benefit and state of the art. There's a requirement to reduce your risk as low as possible, much greater emphasis on risk management. In fact, basically what they did was copy and paste the risk management standard, EN ISO 14971, 2019, such that you must demonstrate compliance to that standard and by implication to this regulation. Risk control measures, risk of user error, including economics. You're going to define the device lifetime and identify undesirable side effects, reduced as far as possible, again, such that the benefits outweigh the risks. Moving on to Chapter 2, there's more detailed requirements for chemical, physical, and biological properties and toxicology. And of course, specific substances, such as substances that are mutagenic, toxic to reproduction. So things like doing tests for leachable substances, extractable substances will be covered under this requirement. More requirements for infection and microbial contamination in GSPR 11. And in GSPR 13 talks to biological tissues, expanded to include human tissues that are non-viable. Also includes catch-all for non-viable biological substances of neither human nor animal origin. As I indicated before, GSPRs 1 to 8 are mandatory for every medical device. No exception. GSPR 10 has subsections 10.1 to 10.6. In fact, 10.4 also has subsections. So the idea is for you to demonstrate compliance with all those requirements that are applicable to your device component. And then GSPRs 11 and 13 are also required. As I indicated earlier, GSPR 23 is not applicable because for this type of review, the notified body is not going to be issuing a certificate. These devices are a component of a medicinal product. So the labeling will not be per the requirements of devices, rather they'll be per the requirements of the medicinal product. Hence, GSPR 23 is not applicable. So moving on to the notified body rule. Notified body only provides a statement of compliance with the GSPRs. There's no certificate issued. And after the final technical review, notified bodies will then issue a notified body opinion report. There is no requirement for a 5-year certification cycle for the reports. The applicant does not need to inform SGS in advance of implementation of change. Remember, if you go into MDR Annex 9, paragraph 2.4, which relates to your quality management system, the moment you plan making changes to your quality management system, you are required to report that to your notified body. Well, for these type of devices, i.e. the Article 117 type devices, you don't need to do that. You don't need to inform the notified body in advance. Again, the applicant does not need to undertake a post-market surveillance in accordance with Annex 16. Vigilance for such products will be under the medicinal product requirements. They'll be beyond the scope of medical devices. So the notified body assessment report will provide details on evidence assessed by the notified body, including reference to key reports, detail the technical characteristics of the device, including drawings, specifications. We'll have to summarize how the manufacturer has demonstrated conformity with the requirements, and we'll conclude with a clear confirmation of acceptability or not with reference to applicable requirements. It has to be comprehensive. It has to be unambiguous, such that when the medicinal authorities read that opinion, they will fully understand the conclusion reached by the notified body and the objective evidence the notified body saw in reaching that conclusion or those conclusions. So notified body would also have to undertake assessment of changes of the device component. But in this case, it is the market authorization application holder that must manage device changes and consider impacts to their product. The notified body involvement in assessment of such changes will include things like impact of device safety or performance, device design change impacting usability. Remember, we saw that in GSPR number 5. Product formulation changes with any of the active pharmaceutical ingredients now begin to have some synergistic reaction, negative synergistic reaction with the plastic component of the device, intended use of the device, and change to medicinal products. So these are some of the changes that notified body will be involved with. Keep in mind, the product approval is the medicines agency responsibility. The notified body opinion report must be provided in full to the medicines agency. Keep in mind, the contract is between the market authorization application holder and the notified body. In other words, it's the pharmaceutical product manufacturer that has a contract with the notified body, whose focus will be conducting the assessment of the device component of this medicinal product. The notified body then communicates via the market authorization application holder. But in such matters, also anticipate that the medicines agency will contact the notified body directly if they want any clarifications or want additional information on the device component. So I did mention we're going to talk very briefly about the EU regulations timeline extensions. Here it is in summary. The key thing here is that there's a deadline fast approaching in about 5 weeks. This is for current device manufacturers whose products meet the requirements and want to stay on their directives approved components to file the application with their notified body by May 26, 2024, 5 weeks away, and have a contract signed with that notified body by September 2024. And the items in the red boxes are an indication of when various products will be timing out. In other words, end of the transition period under the MDR for such devices. So we're talking about MDD Class 3 custom implantable devices will end 26 May 2026. MDD and AIMD Class 3 and MDD Class 2B implantable transitions will end on December 31, 2027. And for the remainder of the devices, transition will end on 31st December 2028. You must be thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? This deadline is fast approaching. Well, my advice is don't panic, keep calm, but you got to move fast because the clock is ticking down to May 26th. So I thought in this following section, we'll cover selected question and answers on practical aspects of implementation of the extended timeline regulation, which is regulation 2023/607. And I'll take this in turn. Which devices can benefit from the extended transitional period? Only legacy devices. Those devices can be Class 1, for which the EC's declaration of conformity was drawn up prior to 26 May 2021, and of course requires with the conformity assessment procedure, the MDR requires the involvement of a notified body. That would be one category of devices. The other ones will be devices covered by a valid EC certificate issued in accordance with the directives prior to 26 May 2021. So if you have such devices, this is the time. You only have 5 weeks to make your intentions known to your notified body that you wish to transfer those devices onto the MDR and therefore want to be allowed to continue marketing those devices beyond 26 May 2024. Number 2, can devices that have already been certified in accordance with the MDR benefit from extended transitional period? This answer is yes, provided the directive certificates have not been withdrawn by the notified body. Remember, a notified body may withdraw a certificate if the relevant legal requirements are no longer met by the manufacturer, or where a certificate should not have been issued, taking account of the principle of proportionality. You must be wondering, what does it mean to be a legacy device? A legacy device and the corresponding MDR compliant device can be placed on the market in parallel until the end of the relevant transition period that I just read to you. Yeah. So, number 3, what about legacy devices for which the manufacturer does not wish to apply under the MDR? It's pretty clear. For those devices, the transition period will end 26 May 2024. It's pretty clear what it says. It says, if your device is covered by a certificate that expires after March 20th, 2023, and before 26 May 2024, it means your transition period will end on 26 May 2024. Number 4, which classification rules apply to determine whether the extended transition period ends on 31st December 2027 or 31st December 2028? Essentially, it's going to be per the guidance document, MDCG 2021-2025, which is where legacy devices are defined. The prevailing classification rules will be based on the directive certificates, because these devices are currently on the EU market under those directives. So you're going to use the classification rules under the directives to make that determination in terms of when the transitional period will end for your device. So, bottom line is extend your directive certificates before the deadline of 26 May 2024. If you are going to the EU market for the first time, seek an MDR notified body that can cover the device drug component bit of your review such that they can issue a notified body opinion report, which the market authorization application holder can then include in their dossier to submit to the medicinal authorities in Europe. Don't delay, act now. Because as you can see, that deadline is only 5 weeks away. And if you don't do that, it means you can no longer sell that device component, which is part of a medicinal product on the EU market. Any applications beyond that date will be treated as brand new, in which case you have to go through the whole 9 yards of MDR requirements. That's the end of today's webinar. Thank you.
Ibim, there are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay. Can you summarize them for me, please?
Sure. I'll read them off. You answer them. How about that?
Okay.
Number 1, does SGS require clinical evaluation for the device part of a single integral DDC to assess device part against Annex 1?
Oh, clinical eval. Not really. If you think about it, you're looking at those first 8 GSPRs in Chapter 1 and the applicable requirements, GSPRs 11 and 13 in particular, under Chapter 2. So clearly, you're focusing in on the component. Because remember, this is a component of a medicinal substance. They are the ones who are going to be looking at the usefulness of the medicinal substance and the clinical relevance. Next, please.
Yeah. For the first 5 GSPRs, is it possible to state partial compliance to ISO 14971? Or is it a requirement to enforce full compliance?
Full compliance, please.
Okay.
How can you even bother thinking about partial components of risk management? I don't understand that.
Okay, next.
I mean, clearly, the way you go about risk management of, I don't know, a device component in an inhaler will be different from how you go about doing risk management for a total hip joint. So the concept of proportionality applies in this case.
Okay. Next, is it necessary to justify why we are not using harmonized standards in the GSPR report?
You could, but I don't think you're going to be very successful. Because in Europe, using harmonized standards is presumption of compliance. So if you choose not to use harmonized standards, then you really have an uphill task to kind of demonstrate that you are compliant. I'm not saying it's impossible, but why don't you make life easier for yourself? And in Europe, there's a hierarchy of standards. Harmonized standards used to be at the top of the pyramid. But under the MDR, there's a new sheriff in town. He's called Common Specifications. So there's common specifications, harmonized standards, non-harmonized standards, European standards, such as BSI standards for the UK. Oh, sorry, forget about BSI. DIN standards, etc., which are written by the various member states. Then there are other national standards, so AMI standards. And then, of course, that could be maybe you are working on something that is cutting edge, very innovative. There are no international standards. That will then come at the bottom, whereby you now have company specifications. But remember, if you do not use the harmonized standards, then it will be a real tall order for you to justify, demonstrate compliance. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Next question, please.
Yeah. Yep. Why doesn't MDD and MDR have combination product types like DFA does?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Why doesn't MDD and MDR have combination product types like DFA does?
I really can't answer that. I mean, this is down to the powers in Europe that have written the regulatory framework under the directives and now have superseded those with the new regulatory framework under the regulations, MDR and IVDR.
Okay. Next.
Yes.
Under Part 4, FDA recognizes cross-labeled and co-packaged drugs and devices as a combination product. Does EU MDR only recognize single entity products as a combo product? For example, only pre-filled syringe versus a syringe and a vial in a single package?
Well, that's interesting. I think we are now venturing into medicinal products for which I will not claim to be an expert. What I know is this: if you are going to place that product on the EU market as a medicinal product, you have to follow the requirements of the European Medicines Agency.
Okay.
I have no idea how the European approach compares with what FDA requires in the United States. Remember, there are two different jurisdictions. So what may be acceptable to the FDA may not necessarily be acceptable in Europe.
Right. Okay, next.
Yes.
For patient safety, why doesn't Article 117 specifically regulate the notified body competency?
No, but remember, the device component here is part of a medicinal product. So the medicinal agencies in Europe don't have the expertise of reviewing devices. Even under the directives, you could see there was an inconsistent approach. In fact, under the MDD, it doesn't really spell out what you got. So think about it that this thing is actually a medicine in Europe, but because the medicinal agency or medicinal competent authorities don't have the expertise in-house, they are now subcontracting review of the device component to a notified body, albeit limited to applicable GSPRs. Think about it. When it comes to devices that have a medicinal substance that has an ancillary effect, the opposite happens, whereby notified bodies are obligated to seek scientific advice from either the European Medicines Agency or the national medicines competent authorities. So the European situation is saying they will seek advice from wherever the expertise lies. Next question.
Okay. Why is GSPR 12 not relevant?
Because that will be covered as part of a medicinal, a drug device medicinal review where the drug is acting, has an ancillary effect.
Okay, next.
Such as, a bone cement. I'm thinking about the orthopedics world here. A bone cement, which has some antibiotic or a drug-eluting stent.
Okay. Next. In your experience, how long does it normally take to get a notified body opinion?
To get a notified body?
A notified body opinion.
Oh. You see, right now it's very difficult to put a fine number on that, but I will suggest it should be done well within 12 months, because you are not doing, if you may, the whole 9 yards of a typical medical device product review. This is a component of a medicinal product. So depending on where you are, I mean, if you need your QMS, your quality management system reviewed, etc., and all that, I'll say within 12 months. But if everything is in order, I'll suggest within 9 months you should be done. I mean, for a kickoff, you're not even looking at chapter 3 of the GSPR. So you're not looking at IFUs, you're not looking at labels. That saves you time. Under chapter 2, you're not looking at everything that is under chapter 2. You're only looking at things that are applicable to your device. So really, most of the time is going to be spent on those first 8 GSPRs.
Okay. And this is the last question. Risk management under ISO 14971 requires total product life cycle, including post-market surveillance. Yet post-market surveillance is not required for combination products under Article 117. Can you speak to how to reconcile that?
It's pretty easy. In that context, if it was a standalone device, then of course you have to do PMS. There's no two ways about that. But in this case, the PMS aspects will be addressed under the pharmacovigilance requirements that are applicable to medicinal products. So that aspect of risk management, yes, you can outline it, but then refer to the fact that it's going to be covered under pharmacovigilance.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, keep in mind, these devices are not being placed on the market as devices per se. They are components of a medicinal product. So that is the context in which you're going to look at this.
So that's it for the questions, Ibim. And that's it for your presentation. I want to thank everyone for coming today and joining us.
Thank you.
And you should be receiving an email from marketing shortly with a link to this. And if you have any questions or want to have a side chat, happy to schedule with you. My email address is right on this page here. Please send me a note and we can schedule something. But thank you everyone for coming today. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.